Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to bring onto the InnovaBuzz podcast today as my guest from Ottawa, Ontario in Canada, Riley Jarvis, who's the founder and CEO of The Sleep Consultant, an organisation that helps CEOs, entrepreneurs and high performance transform their sleep to significantly boost both their productivity and energy levels. And I'm sure there's a lot more behind that. So welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Riley. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you so much, Jürgen. Really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be on.
Now, I recently joined you on your Sleep for Side Hustlers podcast to have a conversation, and I'm really looking forward to continue our conversation today with a focus, of course, on sleep and its impact on performance.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Now, before we start talking about all things sleep and performance, tell me a little bit about the impact you're making in the world today.
Oh, it's gone international at this point. Yeah, it started all locally in the small town of Ottawa, a little bit in Canada, and now it's just spread to this massive machine that's talking with people in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South America, some Africa, and really just helping people with their sleep, really to impact their performance. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you are in the world, everybody needs better sleep. We can't escape it. We got to pay our taxes. We got to sleep. Those are the two things that'll always be set in stone. So, yeah, it's really just taking the world by storm, and being able to see these transformations in people who are in their 20s all the way up until their 60s, 70s, and even 80s, depending on what they want in life, what their goals are. It's just been so phenomenal to see, and it's been really impactful at the same time.
Do you see a change in people's attitude towards sleep? I mean, I remember when I was a young fellow and thought I was invincible, and sleep was kind of one of those things where you thought, well, you know, that's just dead time, so I'll just stay up late and see if I can get up early and burn the candles at both ends was the expression we often used. And in some ways, totally counterintuitive, right? Because we just worked harder and longer, and yet the effectiveness of that time spent working or doing whatever it is, I mean, often it was play as well, was just not as good. So do you see a change in attitudes of people these days that sleep is important to get, first of all, the right amount of sleep, and secondly, a good quality of sleep?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's kind of a gray area question. So the answer is yes, but also no at the same time. It really depends on who you talk to, because the grand delusion of this generation is like you have to hustle more and work harder in order to get ahead, because somehow when we're awake and the longer we can stay awake, the more that we can get stuff done. And sleep is just this thing we put on the back burner where we close our eyes, we open our eyes, and we wish we didn't have to do it, but we have to do it anyway. And then we just kind of get on with our day. And the truth is, it should be completely the opposite. If we're able to prioritize our sleep, we can actually function better during the day, have better performance because we have better mental acuity, our memory is better, emotional intelligence is better, and all these other things that it impacts our day, and all these minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, and we just get way more done. And we're able to work maybe an 8-hour work day and maybe 5 or 6 hours, because that deep work, that's what really matters the most. Is deep work is so much more on point. But in general, I'm seeing more of a change in people with the people that I'm working with. I'm working as hard as I can. There's not too many of us sleep consultants out there, but for those that are, with a lot of our clients, when people get sort of a taste of what that ability to sleep better feels like, it becomes a new addiction, and they want to get more and more and more of it. And then when they look back at their old self, they realize, I wish I had slept, prioritized sleep more and more.
So how did you get into this sleep consulting, as you put it, and discover that there was a need there and an opportunity for you, and certainly a blue ocean?
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely is a blue ocean, especially now. But my sort of origin story going back is when I went to school, I was taking finance, kind of followed my parents' footsteps. That's what they were in. And I went into private equity. Then I went into investment banking for some time. And I was in my early 20s when, somebody that age should be very healthy and be able to put in long hours. I mean, the typical is 12 to 18-hour work days. As I was doing that, though, I noticed my body becoming more and more burnt out, and I wasn't able to make deadlines as much. Long story short, I was forced to quit my job, and I became bedridden just because my health was so bad. I couldn't focus anymore. I was losing weight, constant stomach pain. So I didn't know exactly what was going on. I went to go see multiple doctors, multiple specialists, until I went to the gastroenterologist, which specializes in the stomach, and they diagnosed me with Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune condition. It can cause a lot of things. Down the road, it's not good, but it impacts energy and all these things. Add that on top of stress, constant coffees throughout the day. It just was not a good situation. So doctors didn't really give me any solutions with the pills that I was to take. So I really had to take health into my own hands. And it was really here where I was spending hours upon hours for almost 7 years just researching this stuff. Like, how does our biology work on like a root cause level? And it's kind of what, fast forward till today, 5 years later, over the last 5 years, my Crohn's has been 100% complete remission. Doctors don't know why. And I'm functioning better than I ever have before. I've gained the weight back and just, productivity's through the roof and everything else. Now that translates to other people I'm helping now. They don't have to be in a disease state, but I specialize more so in the productivity and the focus and the performance side of things.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. The impact that, so you're off medication, you're not on special diets or anything. It's all down to getting your sleep pattern right.
Yeah, getting the sleep down. And it was a myriad of things, but when I really tried to tackle my sleep, that's when I felt so much better. And I was able to track my sleep and just objectively how I felt as well. And when I was getting my sleep down, as my sleep got better, the Crohn's started to improve, and all the lab tests and the work was starting to show that. But then when I kept honing that thing, it just got better and better. As a result, I have more energy. I got into other things too, diet, exercise, nutrition, all these other things that go into better sleep, and better sleep goes into the other things as well. It's all of our system in our body works together. But that was really the pivotal point for me.
Yeah, well, there's so much to unpack in that. I mean, certainly diet, exercise, everything works together. The body is a fine-tuned machine, as you put it. So in terms of the sleep, what are some of the common misconceptions that people should be aware of and should be thinking about perhaps changing right now? Just simple things that they can do to improve their sleep and sleep patterns, and depth of sleep is the other one that I think we'll explore a little bit more too.
For sure. So the big one a lot of people do is blue light before bed. And what that is when we look at our phones right before we go to sleep, when we watch TV right when we go to sleep, all the lights that we're surrounded by when we go to sleep, it emits something called blue light. And there's different forms and spectrums of light, but blue light is the most stimulating one that actually suppresses our melatonin, which is known as our sleep hormone. And there was a recent study that came in. They did it on infants, but the same applies to adults too. 1 hour blue light exposure prior to bed reduces melatonin by 99%, which is absolutely insane. They didn't think it was that much before, but that really impacts your sleep because that is both your deep sleep and your REM sleep. So the first half of your sleep cycle is where your body restores, and the second half is usually where your mind restores. And we need these deep forms of REM sleep cycles in order for us to feel fully mentally restored the next day. Even if we go for coffee, we still need to be able to feel that to function throughout our day in the most optimal way if performance is our goal. So that is number one I would do. Number two I would do is we want to sleep in a cold bedroom environment between about 68 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 18-20 degrees Celsius. We also don't want to eat too close prior to bedtime because it can raise our body temperature. Our body is working to, digest that food instead of restoring our body, and it can cause us to wake up in the middle of the night with blood sugar crashes and things like that. So one thing I would say with that is we don't want to eat any heavy meals about 4 to 5 hours prior to bedtime. We don't want any intense physical exercise prior to bedtime, about 4 to 5 hours, I would say. But here's a really cool one that a lot of people don't realize, because people think it's all about the evening routine. But actually what you do in the morning equally impacts how you'll sleep at night. And the reason is because light controls our circadian rhythm. When our body knows the internal clock, when it's time to wake up and when it's time to go to bed and when we feel sleepy. And what we do in the morning is very important because it can time our body when it's time to go to bed, because we're just naturally adapted to rise and wake up and fall asleep with the rising and falling of the sun. So when we first wake up, if we can expose our eyes literally within 15 minutes to the sun and go outside for a walk. Now, it depends on where you are in the world. I'm in Canada, so it's a little bit difficult, especially in the winter months. But if you can, there's something known as a lumen light. It's a really bright light that you can just find on Amazon or something to expose your eyes to the sun, about 15, 30 minutes. But if you can walk outside, always walk outside, usually with no glasses on. A lot of people put glasses on when they first go outside. And what this is doing is telling our body to wake up. It's activating all these hormones and these systems inside of our body that it's time to go. Then that'll also signal when it's time to go to bed as well, to really reduce that light. So you can sort of see the pattern there. those are kind of the big ones, I would say. Other basic things, alcohol is a big one that people drink. They really drink it to settle down, maybe a glass of 2 or wine before bed. I mean, go for it if you can. I mean, you have to be realistic too. You can't just cut out everything and make your life not too interesting. But if you are, I mean, just managing the best way that you can, usually about 4 to 5 hours prior to bed, your last glass of wine is a really good one as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. I mean, the common thing, or one of the common things for me that I always, we've gone back into this habit of having the evening meal sort of as the last thing after we've finished. And part of that is because that's where we have time to sit together after work. And thinking back to my time in Germany, the practice there was your big meal of the day was lunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was lunch, and then the evening meal would be just a light meal, a snack kind of thing. Whereas these days it's around the other way. So that to me ties in with what you said about, having that heavy meal and having those sugar crashes during the night, or even sometimes I've found if I go out for a meal, particularly in the days when I was traveling a lot, that was where you tended not to sleep as much. You'd go out entertaining customers, have a really heavy meal of an evening, drink alcohol as well, and then go to bed. And quite often, the digestive system would be working overtime and you just wouldn't get really good night's sleep. So,
Absolutely.
So all of those things, turning those, inverting those is a really good place to start.
Absolutely. It's massive. And like we don't realize it, but our body and stomach are working overtime. And if you really, like when you dive into the stuff and study it, you can really appreciate what our body is doing. I mean, it's really this magical machine. And if you see it on that level and you give it the right inputs, it's going to give you the right outputs. And I find just mentally, if you see things that way, making those changes can be a lot easier.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm curious about also, it's not just about the length of sleep, right? I mean, the common wisdom is 8 hours sleep is kind of a mean that most people, is good for most people. And yet I know that some people operate really well on less sleep. Others actually need more. Talk to me a little bit more about the depth of sleep and how can we ensure that whatever time we spend sleeping, that we actually have a really restful, deep sleep.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it all comes down to the quality of sleep. And especially if performance and productivity is your goal, quality is usually triumphs quantity always. And the reason is because so many people focus on the quantity of hours. So let me get my 8 hours. But what they neglect is they're waking up 2-3 times a night, whether it's going to the bathroom, the dreams they're having, if it's a cortisol or blood sugar spike, whatever that is. But if we can actually minimize those interruptions and we focus on the quality of our sleep, our deep sleep cycles will be able to make their full entire cycle, each one. If we get all of those, then we're able to function in the most optimal way. So to kind of break that down is we have 90-minute sleep cycles, and it goes from light sleep to deep sleep, REM sleep, and then it resets and it does it again. So because these 90-minute sleep cycles, we usually want to wake up usually at the peak of one of those sleep cycles, not when we're in deep REM sleep like a lot of people do, causing them to feel groggy, but kind of on that tip. So what that would look like is 90 minutes, 3 hours, 4.5, 6 hours, and then 7.5 hours. And a lot of people get 8 hours, and then keep in mind this is total hours sleeping, not time in bed. Sometimes people get that mix. Because when you're able to do that 7.5 hours or the 6 hours or the 4.5 hours, then you're able to feel better too. Now, of course, like 7 hours, 7.5 would be a lot better than 4 hours, 4.5 hours. But it just depends on who you are. If it's a venture capitalist, they only have 4.5 hours of sleep. Okay, fine, let's maximize that. But you still want to get as much as you can without neglecting the quantity at the same time. But that's really one good thing to keep in mind. And how do we actually optimize that? And how do we make it so that deep REM sleep cycle is as optimized and as deep as it should be, as well as the deep sleep as well? And that all comes down to sort of what we talked about, but it's many different lifestyle factors. So if you were to ask yourself, what is the current state of, let's say, your exercise regime, or how is your diet? Because if our bodies are inflamed, let's say if we're overweight and all these other things, we really don't have that much margin for error. So if we were to consume coffee, let's say around noon or 2 p.m., sometimes in the morning for some people, their bodies just aren't used to it at the evening time. And so they still have caffeine circulating through their system and they can't get to sleep. It suppresses something known as adenosine, which helps us become more calm and feel that sleepiness. At the same time, too, but if we're having a meal close to the evening time, our body can't regulate that blood sugar as well, so it causes us to wake up in the middle of the night, or we can't wind down after bed after long days of work. We just can't downshift as much as well as somebody else should. But the good news is wherever you're at, is as long as you make relative gains and improvements in those areas, you'll see tremendous improvements in your sleep as well. So I'm sort of saying to people, it's not one magic pill you take and it's going to fix your sleep. Yeah. Because that's another thing to your first question, is it's kind of a Band-Aid society. We think, oh, if we just take this one pill, we do this other thing, then it's going to help everything. But the good news is when you get a taste of what it feels like by making all these 1% optimizations, tips and tricks are good. But if we can focus on getting our body to a healthy place, you'd be amazed to know that it fixes so many things at the same time. It's, Pareto's principle, 80% of the results with 20% of the work. And sleep is really that thing ROI-wise. If we focus on that, we can just get substantial results in our waking hours as well. So what I would, like I said, focus on the blood sugar, focus on these other things. But what I do with clients as well is we really want to figure out what is our chronobiology type. Are we genetically more a morning person, or are we more of a nighttime person? And you can do different things. One is called the powerofwinequiz.com, but ultimately you want to get a genetic test done to see that. But you can also look at things, for example, like how is your gut? Do you have a lot of infections there? How is your body's ability? Like, what are your hormones like? Do you have a lot of cortisol? Are you burnt out on a hormone level? Just all these things. For example, like a man, a lot of them have testosterone deficiency, and that decreases with age. Well, that actually directly impacts sleep as well. So, some of them are estrogen dominant, some men are, overweight. It just goes back to all these other things which impact like our thyroid gland, our adrenal glands, our pituitary gland in our brain. They all communicate with each other. It's all one big highway inside of our body. So if we can get the synchronization right, they're all within the same rhythm, and we can get the total amount right and the bounce right, one's not too much or too low. It's all about homeostasis, keeping along that balance range, then we'll be in a good place.
Yeah, the body is quite an amazing machine, isn't it? And it's sort of always fascinates me that a lot of people don't treat it that well or abuse parts of it, thinking that it's not going to impact on other parts. And yet, we know, I mean, you pointed out that the digestive system is really important to get right. The brain actually functions better when our digestive system is in order. And then when you think about all the things that are happening totally unconscious, I mean, we don't think about breathing, and yet we breathe, and that keeps us alive, right? We don't think about our heart beating, pumping blood around to all the various places where it's needed, and yet it happens. And it's just an amazing machine. You talked a little bit about exercise there and avoiding sort of really high intensity exercise. I think you said sort of between 4 and 5 hours at the end. That was one of the recommendations, as well as avoiding big meals or lots of alcohol or caffeine at that time. Explain to me a little bit why that is, because I was always, these days I have my exercise in the morning and I tend to relax in the evening. But when I was younger, I would often have high intensity training sessions at the end of the day, because that was just how it worked. When I was playing football, for example, the training sessions would be at the end of the day because everybody was working. I mean, we were amateurs, so we all had jobs, or at the time I was a student, and all the lectures and everything was daytime. So the high intensity training sessions would be in the evening, often under lights in the dark.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, right? Because when we're younger and our bodies are more healthy, we can get away with a lot more. And as the years go on, it's kind of like when we drink alcohol, our hangovers are so much worse as we start to get older. And that's just an example of your body's ability. We need to pay more attention to it as we get older. We're kind of conditioned to the mindset, like we want to be healthy because when we get older, we want our joints to be working okay and everything else. But people aren't thinking on kind of more like a practical level, how we're just functioning on the day-to-day standpoint of things. So yes, when you do get older, exercise closer to bed is definitely one thing that's going to really impact you, because it's going to raise body temperature. It's going to raise a lot of your stimulatory hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, and all these other things. And so it's all about timing it throughout the day and timing your energy inputs based on usually what your chronotype is. So if we can, plan, for example, like a morning walk, or if we can do it in the afternoon, and then around nighttime, we can start settling down, then that's great. Even if you have like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, a lot of the people I work with just do not have the time and they only have the evening to work out. And it's like, okay, great. Well, if you can just do that, then try that. But, we'll make these slight modifications. So instead of like a really heavy workout, just try something lighter. Maybe it's yoga. It could be like a light jog or something like that. Because, exercise close to bedtime can really reduce a lot of those cortisol and other stimulatory hormones as well.
That's great. Yeah. One of the other things you touched on earlier, and I know this is something where I struggle at times, is if there's stuff going on, particularly in the business, and I imagine that a lot of entrepreneurs will be having this. So there might be worry about meeting deadlines, meeting project deadlines. There might be worry about cash flow. We've just had a pandemic which has forced most businesses to pivot in some way, and many businesses have had to make fairly major changes. So there's been a lot going on, a lot of things on people's minds as business owners. And I've found that at times, and sometimes it's not negative, sometimes it's positive. I have some really fabulous idea and the mind's going at 1,000 miles an hour thinking, how can I implement this? What do I need to do? Who do I get on board in this? And it's really excitement. And I go to bed to sleep, and sometimes I have real problems getting to sleep because I can't turn off the mind going, or sometimes I will get to sleep and then wake up at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and the mind turns on and I can't get back to sleep. And even though I've got this trick of writing down thoughts on paper, so I know, okay, I'm not going to forget that in the morning when I wake up and try to get back to sleep, then it helps sometimes, but sometimes I just can't turn off the mind.
I know.
What are your tips for those situations?
Yeah, so if you do wake up in the middle of the night, like let's say we already addressed everything, like lifestyle and all those different things are really in check, but you just happen to wake up in the middle of the night. A couple different things you can do. So the first one is, the obvious one is melatonin. You can just take a little bit of melatonin. Usually, obviously check with your doctor, but between about 0.3 and 3 milligrams is usually a good range because our body produces that naturally. If we take too much, we don't want to become, just so used to it where our body just decreases its natural production. But other things you can do as well is a couple different things. If we wake up and we're just thinking about the thinking, and we're always looping on that, the best thing, and they show this in the science, is we just have to get up and do something until we feel busy again. And that's not really going on our phone or doing something, but I had a lot of clients, some of them would just like get up and start cleaning their house when it was kind of dark outside. And then they would feel sleepy and they just go back to bed again. So if you can do something, it could even be like a light yoga. If we can just get more out of our mind, less in our mind and more into our body, whatever that is for you, it could be a guided meditation, focusing on your breath. There's also something called progressive muscle relaxation. And this is really cool too. And what it is, you just YouTube it, and there's a lot of guided ones, but it's where we tense up certain muscles in our body for a few seconds and then we let go. And if we do that, we can feel more of our body, less in our mind. And this causes everything to calm down, the cortisol to go down, and a lot of those stress hormones to go down as well. So that's kind of one other thing. It depends what's causing people to wake up during the night. One can be if people are having nightmares and bad dreams consistently. They show that, we have a lot of these dreams and we don't necessarily know why, but it's all in the subconscious mind. Most of the time it doesn't make any sense. But what our brain is doing is it's processing stuff from the day prior, the week, the month, the year prior, and all these other things that just going on, whether it's relationships, work related, and whatnot. So what we want to do is about an hour and a half, 90 minutes before bedtime, we just want to journal and brain dump everything that comes to our mind. Even if it's good, it's bad, if you think it's worthy, doesn't matter. Just dump it all on there. That will do is be less of a load for our brain to take on when we do go to sleep, and we can sleep more with more of that blank slate, and we can stay asleep throughout the night. So that's kind of if it's dreams related. if it's blood sugar related, we can wake up and we can go for a source of fat. And what that does is it keeps our blood sugar regulated. What that might be, for example, is could be guacamole, like an avocado, good forms of fat. It could be some nuts. It could be, there's something known as fat bombs, and they're you can buy them too, but it could be whether it's any kind of nut that's kind of in a shape. A lot of people, if you see following the ketogenic diet, they have high fat sources. And it's very good, not for everybody, but it can help stabilize blood sugar. So, it could be like a scoop of peanut butter or a tablespoon of cashew butter that we have, in addition to something known as MCT oil is really good as well to help regulate all that stuff. Honey is really good. It's a form of a sugar, but long story short, it can help you fall asleep. In addition to that, it's really help calm the mind, calm the body. Other supplements, again, check with your doctor, but it's L-theanine, it's naturally in green tea, can help us sleep. There's something known as Gaba. That's when we drink alcohol and we naturally feel more relaxed. That's a part of alcohol that brain neurotransmitter is activating, but we can actually take it in supplement form. Then we can also take, like herbal teas, like lemon balm, chamomile, and just some of these other things to really help wind down as well.
Mm. Yeah, lots of great tips there. So I'd like to have a peppermint tea sometimes I'll have chamomile. I don't like chamomile from the taste point of view, but I know it's good for me for relaxing. Or fennel tea is another one I like to have sort of late in the evening. And I've cut out afternoon coffee.
Good.
I used to have a coffee sort of mid-afternoon, but any later than 4 and I would know about it when I tried to get to sleep. So now I've cut it out completely after lunch.
Oh, that's good. Your body will tell you.
Yeah. Coming back, I had a question about melatonin because I used to use melatonin as a supplement to help overcome jet lag when I was traveling around the world. So, of course, one of the things that I always found, I used to travel from here in Australia to the east coast of the US quite a lot, sometimes to Europe, and the first week would always be tough because usually in the US, it's about 14 or 16 hour time difference to the East Coast, depending on the time of year. So I would find myself at about 3 or 4 in the afternoon wanting to fall asleep. And then, of course, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake. No way to get any more sleep after that. So I'd use melatonin. I'm curious, you mentioned carefully using some melatonin as one idea if you wake up in the middle of the night. How quickly does it actually act when you take it as a supplement?
It's usually pretty fast, especially in the form when you take it sublingually, which means under the tongue, and it just absorbs because it goes directly into your bloodstream right away, opposed to taking it in your gut and it has to, absorb and all that. So usually it's pretty fast, usually about 5-10 minutes for most people, I would say. Usually if they don't feel it, it might be a sign that they might have to take more of it. But again, that's sort of a Band-Aid because in an ideal world, you don't have to do anything to sleep better. Just a side point, really interesting thing is Japan, they did a study and they took 14 chronic insomniacs, and these were high-performing people that could not sleep like at all. And they took them into the study, and what they did was they brought them to the Japanese forest for 2 weeks. They would sleep there, they would be awake there, eat there, everything, and they would go to sleep with the rising and falling of the sun, wake up accordingly. And they found 90% of the people that were inside of that study, they no longer had insomnia, and all it took them was 2 weeks to do so. It just shows you if we can live more like our ancestral environment, as hard as it is with technology and everything, it can do so much for us, and we don't necessarily need all these supplements to do so. But, when we're in a bind, then definitely that can help. Back to melatonin, though, you can take more like 5-10 milligrams in order to do so. But in particular, with your question of travel, in order to help with that travel and jet lag, I usually have no problem with melatonin because we can actually use it as a tool in this case to help us adjust to the new time zone. And what we want to do is about, a few days, like 3 to 4 days prior to us going to that new location, especially if we're over about 3-hour time zone difference, like if you're going from North America to Europe, Australia to some other part of the world, we can start adjusting our schedule and going to bed based on that new time zone. You can do like an hour or 2 difference and slowly adjust your body to it. If you're going from Australia over to North America, maybe you want to start adjusting, a week prior and just like half an hour, 1 hour. And then when you get to that new time zone, you can start using melatonin at the time that you do want to get to bed and do get to sleep, so you can adapt as fast as possible.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things I found most effective on those sort of trips, and of course this depended on the weather in some respects, is if I would usually travel on the Saturday. It would be a 24-hour trip to the east coast of the US.
Wow.
So I'd travel on the Saturday, and if I could arrange it such that I got in late in the evening, East Coast time. So essentially it was bedtime. And then typically from the travel, now I was lucky because I am lucky. I sleep quite well on planes. It's a bit of a joke with with my work colleagues. They always found me a bore to travel with because I would sleep. But if I arrived, even the stress of the traveling, I would usually be tired enough to get at least a few hours sleep there to maybe 4 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then on the Sunday so I had a free day before I needed to work, I would get out as soon as the sun was up, outside into the sunshine, spend the whole day usually walking around, some light physical exercise, but in the sun as much as I could. And I found that was actually the most helpful way to get the body adjusted.
Yeah, it helps so much. And it goes back to light, right? I mean, physical exercise is another big one. In order to beat jet lag, if you can do like high intensity interval training, any kind of exercise and get that heart rate up, especially after the airplane where you've been sedentary for so long. In addition to exposing your eyes to light, that's another one. So it goes to the morning routine and the evening routine as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, this has been fabulous. I'm sure there's lots more that people can learn on your website, and we'll share links with that in a little while. It's a good point now, I think, to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. It's the same 5 questions I ask of every guest, and it's based on their experience, of course, of being in business. So hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers and inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure sleep might... Yeah, and I'm sure sleep might factor in on that. What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Innovative. Well, where do ideas generate? Well, it all comes to the mind. And how do we make our mind as precise as possible and creative as possible? We have to prioritize its health. So I would say sleep. If we can prioritize our deep sleep, that's number one. But also number 2 is the majority of our brain is made of fat, but also water as well. And most people are dehydrated. So we want to drink half of our body weight in ounces per day in water. So making sure to just quickly on that, while we sleep, we lose 1 liter of water just from our breath alone. So when we wake up, we want to go for that first cup of water. With some Himalayan sea salt would be good as well. But 2, I mean, keeping a very lots of fat in our diet, supplementing with fish oil as well is so important for innovation, creativity as well.
Yeah, I love it. And I've started doing that probably 5 or 6 years ago. I started having 750 mils in metric terms of water with a little bit of lemon and honey first thing in the morning. And it just makes such a difference. And I do that before I go out for my exercise. And of course, when I'm exercising, I've got water, so I'm consuming quite a bit of water as well.
That's awesome. Well, you're doing all the right things then.
All right. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Oh, for me, I'm a big chart guy. So in my office, I have a massive whiteboard and I do a huge mind map. So how it's all connected. I do a lot of journaling as well. So what thoughts I'm thinking. I've really dove into the philosophy of Stoicism kind of recently over the last couple of years. And just from that, they really promote journaling. And from that, I've just gained so much clarity of me being to be very intentful with my time, which gives me access to ideas. And while I sleep, to generate those ideas as well. One other really cool thing too is when I have some kind of idea, I know my unconscious mind is always working in the background, and we don't get ideas from us consciously thinking about it. Usually it comes from boom, it pops. It could be in the shower. It could be while we're sleeping. Maybe when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, a lot of people think of these ideas, but then they forget it when they wake up. It's like, oh, what was that again?
That's right. Yeah.
How was the mind working? So that's where journaling can really come in. What can we do to make our conscious mind get to work? So I always usually sleeping on it. When I wake up, I usually have that idea. So if I set the intent before bed, when I sleep, I want to kind of dream or think about this. It seems to work in my favor, and it has with a lot of ideas that have given me quite a bit of success until today.
Yeah, I love the idea of journaling. I kind of dabble in it, but I need to really develop that habit much better.
Tough. Yeah, you really have to. Yeah, it's even me sometimes. It's tough.
But I love that you do mind maps. There's a number of people I've spoken to, fans of mind maps, and that's something that I've been doing since the 1990s. I think I actually met Tony Buzan, who was kind of the father of mind maps. I met him and learned to juggle in an hour. And that kind of convinced me, because that was his metaphor for you can learn to do anything difficult, in inverted commas, very quickly if you do it the right way and approach it the right way. And so
1 hour, that's quite a feat.
Yeah. So that got me into mind mapping, and I love doing that. I've got my whiteboards over here and
fascinating
mind maps up there.
Yeah, a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of successful people seem to use them. So I think there's something to it. If it works for them, I'm sure there's something going on.
All right, what's the favorite resource you use most often?
I would say for me, it's all about organization, because I feel like my mind races too much with all these ideas, and it comes to organizing those things. So for me, it's going to be Google Sheets, and also something known as Trello boards to organize all these thoughts as well. And Google Sheets is just so amazing because it can act as Microsoft Excel, but it's all based in the cloud. And where if I'm on this phone, this computer, this laptop, wherever I am in the world, just being able to organize that, and it's just putting those ideas down. My background is in finance, so I can get by with Microsoft Excel and using all those different functions, how it all works, whether if it's for finance, new ideas I want to come up with. What's really interesting too, though, is I'll sometimes use Google Notes and just put in ideas I have, and I'll go back in time and look at those ideas and see what was the evolution of those things. And it gives me even more ideas, like, oh, I thought about this before, but because this happened, then I forgot about it. So to always have that recollection, because how many thoughts do we have a day? I think they said it's 66,000 a day. So it's how are you even going to memorize all that? So that was a big thing for me. And I find if I have those pieces in place, my brain at least will naturally come up with the answers. And there was that book, Psycho-Cybernetics, it's all about the unconscious mind, but a lot of lessons in there too. Yeah.
That's a fascinating book. I love that book. I can't remember the author's name now. Maxwell somebody. Maltz, that's right. Yeah. Cybernetics. So we'll link to that one as well. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
It's all about baby steps. A big reason why do people fall off diets, fall off exercise plans? It's because it's so complicated. And so you have to baby step it and do whatever works for you. I think a lot of people, like personal trainers who work with clients, they say, okay, we got to do these 10 things here. And the person's like, well, I don't even know how to do the first 3. So what I always do with people and how they stick to a habit is we do the first habit. I mean, it could be something so small. It could be something like, before we go to bed, let's turn off the TV 15 minutes prior, or let's, read a book for 15 minutes prior. And we'll just do that for the first week. And then the second week, because it's so automatic now, we'll just add another 15 minutes, 30 minutes. I mean, that's for that one habit, but waking up, drinking a glass of water, trying to do that over a period of time. Then we'll start stacking with new habits. The other book too, that's really good, is Atomic Habits. And, however long it takes to create that new habit, at first it's difficult. I mean, it's really hard, but then it just becomes a lifestyle, and it's as easy as you getting up to go to the bathroom, or having breakfast or something like that. It's just part of your natural day to day. And then when you look back, it's like this new person you become. You don't realize it at the time, but it's just, again, that's where journaling can help. But that's where it's really, really important as well. So that's a big thing, I'd say.
Yeah. Making things as simple as possible. I love that. Yeah. And certainly Atomic Habits. We'll link to that as well, because I'm a big fan of that book and all of James Clear's work. Yeah.
One other note I would say on that is it's more important to remove something negative than it is to add another thing back in. Because one, that's simplicity. And two, it's also, the negative things usually do more detriment to us than the positive things we add back in. And, you know, it's one thing I've been considering is minimalism, not going like to the extreme, but just trying that, like maybe selling all the books that I have and just, you know, all the stuff that I don't need. Because a lot of people don't realize all this clutter that's in their mind of stuff they're thinking about takes more control than you think. And the people that have adopted minimalism, it's just amazing. Like, they're worth a lot of money, but they just have a laptop. They travel the world, no mortgage, no responsibilities. I mean, it's a big leap. It's not for everybody, but just to showcase that point, you know, what it can do for the mind is pretty amazing.
Yes, the clutter that we have and the space that occupies, not just physically, but in our minds, is, certainly has an impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
To differentiate yourself, I would say it would be ingraining a habit. Well, a couple different things, but what I would say is this: of people that I work with that have just like completely revolutionized, changed themselves, changed their identity, how they feel, how they look, everything, is starting the upward spiral effect where they start to feel better, people respond to them better, and it's all about making some positive change in their life and turning that into a habit. So, I mean, obviously I would say sleep, but I would say just more general, if you can adopt a healthier lifestyle, if you can focus on improving the internal first before focusing on the external, I think that can be such a revolutionary change. Because if you think about it, if you focus on the internal first, and let's say now you become version 2.0 of yourself who has more energy, you know, just can better relationships, like all these things will manifest from just how you feel better as a person. You're more enjoyable to be around, but you're also quicker on your feet. You can think better. Now multiply that over, you know, weeks, months, years. I mean, the results are exponential, really.
Yeah, I love it. Working on yourself first. And I think a lot of us get trapped into what you said earlier about the Band-Aid solutions, the quick fixes and so on. And yet it's the little things, following the atomic habits philosophy that we can do and work on for ourselves or in ourselves that make a big difference over time.
Yeah, that's just it.
All right. Well, thanks, Riley. This has been absolutely fabulous. Now, where can people find out more about you and the work you do and the sleep consultant services and also the Sleep for Side Hustlers podcast?
Absolutely. So they can go to www.thesleepconsultant.com. On top of there, they'll get a bunch of free resources to help them with their sleep. I also do free 15-minute sleep assessments with people. We'll just dive into like, where are you currently struggling? And I'll give you just a bunch of free resources to where I can help you out. I do have paid programs where I can set lab test kits and work with you on a one-on-one basis, track your sleep every night and things like that as well. But it just depends on where people are at. And it's one way people can get better really fast. You know, we can take a sniper-like approach, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and some of them we talked about today that people can start trying to feel better today.
Wonderful. And we'll have links to all of those in the show notes, and maybe people can get in touch and reach out to say thanks for what you've shared today, and maybe even take advantage of that free 15-minute consult, which I have done and certainly got some value from that.
Fantastic.
So thanks for that.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm very happy to help anyone that it's a journey that I personally struggle with sleep. So I take people's results pretty personally at this point.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have some parting advice to our listeners as we wrap up the show today?
Absolutely. I would say the two things we touched on a little bit in the show, but would be to baby step your improvements. Focus on, instead of making one big leap, focus on just 1% better today than yesterday, whether it's diet, exercise, sleep, any of that stuff. And number two, just know that if you focus on yourself first and not trying to hustle, burning the candle from both ends and taking coffee or any kind of Band-Aid to compensate for that, but instead focusing on everything from a root cause level, you'll just have a sustainable native source of just, you know, better health, longevity, well-being, focus, productivity for just years and years to come. So for the short term and the long term, it just benefits way more immensely.
Yeah. And that's where journaling can help. Write down the little habits you've improved each day, and then look back over the week. Now all of a sudden you have 7 things that you've improved, and look back over the month. Now all of a sudden you've got between 28 and 31 things you've improved. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in the Atomic Habits book, it showed the chart. If you improve 1% per day, within a year, you become something like 36 times better. Something like it's just profound, the results that can happen from that.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. And finally, Riley, who else should I bring on this show and why?
Somebody I would highly suggest is an individual named Daniel Hill. And Daniel Hill, he's kind of he's a mindset coach. He focuses a lot on the unconscious mind, but when it comes to sleep, I've talked to a lot of people in this space, and he's by far one of the best. He's based out of the UK, but he's been in the field, 20, 30 years, and he's all about focusing on the unconscious mind, releasing a lot of trauma. I mean, it doesn't have to be some insane incident that happened to you, but when we're a child, microforms of trauma, it really runs our lives, how we behave, addictions we have, negative habits we have, how badly we sleep, just negative thoughts that automatically pop up. What if you could live a life that you didn't have any of that and your mind was just blank? It was just, and you just had positive thoughts, you minimize those negative ones. That's what working on your mind can really help achieve by releasing this stuff, especially in the unconscious mind. So I can definitely provide the link to Daniel Hill as well.
Excellent. Well, we'll reach out to Daniel and bring him on the show as well. It sounds like a fascinating topic to dig into, and certainly there are a lot of things, a lot of baggage that we carry around with ourselves, and it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't need to be some hugely disastrous experience. It could be simply that, a teacher rated us down on a project we did, and we carry that around as baggage for the rest of our life.
That's right. Yeah. Totally.
All right. Well, thanks, Riley. I've really enjoyed our conversation again today and really learned a lot about some of the little things that we can all do to improve our sleep and get better quality sleep as well as the time. So I'm really looking forward to hearing input from the listeners as to what they took away and what they've implemented and the results that they get as a result of implementing those things. So thanks again for sharing all that, Riley, and please do stay in touch. All the best for the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jürgen. It was a pleasure being on your show and looking forward to keeping in touch.